Norway Chess 2016 has begun. It's a 10-player all-play-all, and quite an interesting field with, of course, Magnus Carlsen as the main man. I'm sure he wants to show the world that it's not just about Karyakin and the candidates. He wants to prove that he's still the boss in the chess world. In the first round, we had three of the favourites playing against three of the perhaps slightly weaker players, and I'd like to look at those games. So first of all, Vladimir Kramnik, who's currently rated number 2 in the world, against Niels Grandelius, who's a Swedish grandmaster, and he was the qualifier for this event. Kramnik with white had a very pleasant opening, a really nice endgame advantage, but Grandelius defended extremely well, and, well, you can see that with black he's still a bit worse here. Kramnik's rook and knight very active, and Kramnik has a little bit of space advantage with his pawns. Grandelius's king and knight rather passive, but he has done well in activating his rook. Now, this is the 33rd move, time is getting a bit short, and this is a really critical moment in the game. And it's one of those really difficult decisions that you have to make as a defender. Here, Grandelius has created a little bit of counterplay with his g-pawn. Now, he has basically a choice of two different continuations, both, well, give him a worse position, but which one do you go for? He took the pawn, which turned out to be a big mistake. He should have given check, and this would have traded pawns like this. Still not very nice for black. Let's get to this position, for example, and you can see, well, black is actually a pawn up here. But the important thing about the position is that white's pieces are really active. Black's king and knight still dreadfully placed. But this would have given black his best chance of holding the game. The h-pawn does create some counterplay. But let's go back to the game. Instead, Grandelius took on f4. Kramnik gave a check, and then took on e6, and now things start to get a bit nasty for the king. There's actually a threat to check on f8, and suddenly there are some very nasty mating threats against the king. Well, for example, and now Grandelius stepped out of the way with king f5, but if rook takes pawn check, then yeah, now there's a clear threat to check and take on h7, which would be mate. So let's see what happens. I just want to show you this. There's some nice variations. Knight f8, threatening checkmate. Now knight g7 and rook f7, simply threatening to take here. So if f5, g4, and now there is no sensible defence to rook f6 and checkmate. Of course, if the knight moves, then rook takes h7 is mate. There are quite a few study ideas that have a very similar theme to this, actually. It's rather beautiful. That's the kind of scrape that black is in at the moment. Grandelius played instead king f5. Knight c5, good move. So that protects the pawn, and this rook has a couple of things it would like to take. If knight d6, black would love to activate this knight, but actually it does no good at all. Rook d7, and the knight is running short of squares. So Grandelius played rook c2, which looks like it could provide counterplay. Great move from Kramnik now, knight e4. Now that knight stops rook c3 check, controls d2, preventing counterplay with rook d2, but also controls that d6 square, so that knight is really dominated now. And of course the threat is to play rook takes pawn. Knight c7 played to defend the pawn, rook b6, excellent move, Black's king again in a mating net, and after knight d5, rook d6, excellent move, hitting the knight. If the knight moves, then rook f6, and so Grandelius had to resign. So he defended well for a long time, but cracked under pressure. Now let's turn to the game between Anish Giri and Pavel Ulyanov. Pavel Ulyanov, very strong grandmaster from the Ukraine, and had some excellent results at the end of 2015. Well, it was a Gyoko piano. Ulyanov has advanced with g5, which is, of course, slightly risky. If things go wrong, then the king can suffer. And this is already quite a crunch moment in the game. Giri thought for over half an hour before he took on e5. It's getting extremely complicated now. Knight takes e4, so threat to take on f2. So Giri blocks that with knight e3. I think the thing with this position is that Black has to be so careful having advanced the pawn. If he makes one false move, then his king could be in big trouble. So knight takes e5. And now knight g4, and this really is getting very hot. We can see threats here, threats here. Sometimes that pin is annoying. There's a lot going on in this position. In fact, Ulyanov still has a reasonable position, but I'm afraid he didn't negotiate the complications very well. And here he played h5, which was a mistake. He should either play king g7 or king h7 to defend that h-pawn. Let's have a look at king h7. And if Giri tries what he played in the game, which was to take on e4, then this doesn't work out well, because with the king activated, suddenly Black has a tremendous initiative here. I mean, this is actually better for Black, no doubt about it. White doesn't have to go in for that. For example, bishop d5 is probably the best move. f2 is defended by the knight, and if f5 you can take, and rook e2. Well, I think it's still quite a double-edged position actually, but I think both sides are alright here. But instead Ulyanov played h5, and it's not clear to me what he overlooked. Rook takes e4 was played. Now if pawn takes knight, then rook takes pawn, and basically white is winning a pawn here. Black would love to play f6 to defend both, but of course there's a pin, so that's better for white. In the game, Ulyanov played bishop takes rook, and after the exchange of queens, then check. And, well, we have a material balance that is still even, bishop and knight against rook, but here there's a huge difference between this position and the one we just looked at. White's minor pieces, in particular that knight, have stable squares, and I mean this is just a winning position for white. It's incredibly easy because Giri has total control. It's his kind of position. That knight can't be shifted. That move g4 incredibly important. So the knight is secure and stable on e4. King comes to the middle, covers all the entry squares. Black can do absolutely nothing, and well, Giri won very, very easily. By the way, I should say, if you want the full detail of these games I looked at, then do check out chessbase.com, where you can get you can see the full games. I'm afraid I haven't got time to go through them all, but this is a completely winning position for white. So Giri managed to win a game. Now, Magnus Carlsen, he was playing against Pantala Hari Krishna, Indian Grandmaster, Indian, well, number 2 behind Vishwanathan Anand, but Hari Krishna, well, he showed how strong he is in many top tournaments over the years. Rated 2763. Well, how's Magnus doing? Magnus has already showed a real resolve in this tournament. He is known for starting slowly in tournaments, and that includes the initial Blitz tournament, which decides the pairings. But he won the Blitz tournament convincingly, and well, clearly he wanted to show that he doesn't always start slowly. Apparently he hasn't won a first round game in a tournament since 2014. But with the white pieces today, he certainly had a very pleasant position out of the opening. You can see everything is very harmonious in the white camp. Nice overlap on the queen side, two isolated pawns here, that bishop lurking very nicely. That knight is potentially a problem. It's not supported by a pawn. Let's see how Magnus exploited that. I really like Magnus's next move. He played queen to e3 after just a minute and a half thinking time. This is a great move, very surprising move, because how many of us would voluntarily allow our pawns to be shattered on the king side? Of course, black can exchange, but the important thing here is that this gives white such a free hand in the endgame. I've already mentioned that very potent queenside pawn majority, but that pawn somehow looks a bit weaker with the queens off the board. Certainly no hits against white's king, and that bishop might just pop out to attack the rook, and you can see that without the queen that knight is really unstable on c6 without pawn support. So Hare Krishna decided to back out of that, of a queen exchange, and he retreated. If the queen comes forward, of course, then rook c5, and this is starting to look great for white. So Hare Krishna backed down, but that certainly gives white a big initiative. Bishop h3, good move, hitting the rook. Rook came to the side. Queen c3 attacking the knight on c6, and now this is a problem. That knight has to move back, and having forced the knight back, then white's knight steps in, and what a beautiful piece, controlling those lovely squares. So, and of course that bishop controlling the important c8 square, so white is dominating on the c file. Knight e4. Queen goes in. Well, the endgame is hopeless for black. So Hare Krishna avoided that with queen a6, and now f3. And black is just getting pushed back here. If, let's say, knight f6, then, well, let's cover the a pawn, rook c3, and, you know, that queen could even be in trouble once that bishop bounces back off the cushion to hit the queen. No counterplay for black. Hare Krishna tried knight g5. Bishop came in. Good move. So still controlling that important c8 square. And white really dominating. h4 from Magnus, just pushing the knight back. Of course, that knight could retreat, but it's a pretty miserable position for black to defend. Soon that king will step up just to cover everything. Maybe rook c3 first. Just a great position for white. But instead, Hare Krishna, after not very much thought, decided to give up the knight. Now, he gets lots of pawns, gets 3 pawns for the piece, but this position is absolutely hopeless. In fact, it hasn't really freed his position at all. White still completely dominates, and now it's a very easy task just to switch over to attack the king. And well, Magnus was playing his moves almost instantly. It's so easy for white. Not a nice position for the knight. I mean, this is absolutely terrible. And very sensibly, Magnus completely ignores this a pawn and just continues with his attack. Threat, knight c6. Queen comes back, and now this introduces a new threat of attack. And here, well, okay, Magnus, I mean, he's banging out his moves really quickly, and he played queen f5, which wins very simply. He could have actually forced a win even quicker like that, but okay, Queen F5 is so simple anyway. There is really no defence. King G8 played, takes, and with this move, Bishop F7, Hari Krishna resigned. Of course, if that's taken, then Rook E8 check. Magnus, I mean, this is all a question of taste with how you win. I quite like Rook E8 because that looks like a very comical finish to me, with black's pieces just clogging each other up. But anyway, Magnus chose Bishop F7, which does the trick. After this move, Queen E3, it was all straightforward for Magnus, and I think a really convincing victory for him. So that's the first round over. 9 rounds in total. Do join me for further reports. Thanks for watching.